welcome to Hallam CU Events Week. I'm Anna. If you have been following us along, you'd know that this is the last day of the first week of Events Week. But if you haven't been here and you've missed what's been going on so far, that's completely fine. So we've just been having a week of virtual online events based on different topics. We've had sport, we've had art, we've had the NHS, and we've just been doing different live streams, interviews, like testimony sharing, and just talks. So it links Jesus into the big topics of today, and it's just been really exciting. So on to what's happening right now. So today's a bit different. So we have the stream at 1 p.m, which is what you're seeing now. And then later we're gonna come together on Zoom and just have some chats about either mental health or just whatever you want to chat about. There's games, options, whatever. Anyway, so I'll speak more on that later. So on to the interview. It's stolen from York Uni CU, I believe. It's a pre-recorded one. So there's this random guy with like curly hair. He keeps popping up and asking Emma questions. So don't mind him, just go along with it. I've tried to cut the clip as well as I can, but it was kind of hard. So yeah, that's your disclaimer for that one. Anyways, so it's this lady called Emma's the story with mental health and how she found Jesus and the Lord within that, and how he helps and sustains her, and it's just a really helpful perspective about that, because I know that mental health is such a big thing, particularly at the moment in a pandemic, and it's something so many people struggle with. So it's just really helpful and a good message to hear. So the video is about 20 minutes long, and I'm just going to pop back up on the end and have another chat with you guys, explain more about later, explain more about what's going on with the rest of Events Week. So I'll see you then, and I hope you enjoy it.
Speaking about your story today, I'd love to start at the beginning and how life looked for you growing up, and then as you moved into your teens, what life looked like at that stage for you.
Sure. So as you can probably hear, I'm not from around these parts. I grew up in Northern Ireland, part of a really loving and secure family, not a family of Christians, but you know, just a great family. And I always knew who I was and where I belonged there. I guess I'm really one of life's good girls. I'd love in some ways to say I'm a rebel. This is a story with car chases and male models, and you know, it's really not at all. If you'd met me when I was 3, you'd have found a wee girl who liked smoothing out the sand in the sand pits and chasing the other kids away. So things within the lines, nice and tidy. So the way that I knew who I was I had certain rules or things that were expected of me. I did those things, and that was me. And that worked for me pretty well as a child. But when I became 13, some things in my life changed. My body was changing, but not the way that I saw other women on TV or on magazines. I just didn't look like them at all. My grandfather died. It was the first time I lost someone close to me. I started going along to a church, but the sort of faith I discovered was a God who looked awfully like me, like a headmaster who wanted me to keep rules, not the God of the Bible at all. Yeah, so all of these different things going on, and they added up to a little girl who felt like the sand was spilling out of her sandpit, and she wanted to get it all back in again. I wanted my body to stop spilling out, and I wanted all these big questions about life and, you know, death and who is God and what does it mean to be a woman and what is all of this all about? I wanted them to go away. And at the same time, this was Northern Ireland, I think in the 80s, we were hearing for the first time about a disease called AIDS that no one had really heard much about. All we knew was that it killed you, and we didn't know how you got it. But the big sort of message was, don't get it. And with very little information. So it felt to me like the world was a really scary place. And I guess when you're 13, you can't control very much, but you can control your own body. And it wasn't that I looked in the mirror and I felt like I was fat, you know, in that sense. It was just that I felt messy. I felt like all of my questions were too big for my body, and my body itself was spilling out in ways I hadn't before. And I couldn't answer those big questions, but I could make my body smaller. And it seemed to me like if I could shrink my body, I could also get rid of those questions. I couldn't answer the big things, but I could simplify life to one little thing. Could I be smaller? And that was something I was really good at. Anyway, I got treatment for that. And as I was getting treatment for that, I developed obsessive compulsive disorder, which is, you know, compulsive hand washing, and where you have these horrible anxieties that are only relieved by doing lots of rituals. So there were lots of different sort of mental health things that popped up for me, along with depression and anxiety at the same time. By the time I was 18, I looked a lot better on the outside. The treatment really focused on gaining weight, which is vital, but it's not the only part of the story. And I really felt like I'd messed up and I had to make myself better again. So I threw myself into schoolwork this time. I got a place at university. I got into Oxford, and in my school, that was a big thing at the time. We got a half day off, and you know, it seemed like I was quite successful at uni. You know, I was doing well. I was, you know, the sort of little Irish potato that had made good and sailed across the ocean. But inside, I was just as insecure as before, and getting the grades and things didn't make me feel any better about myself. After uni, I threw myself into some church work that spoke really about a gospel I didn't understand. I understood sin. I understood that I needed to prove myself for God, but I didn't understand who Jesus was, and I didn't understand all the stuff the Bible talks about grace. Then I had met my husband, my now husband. He was training to be a vicar, which would make me a vicar's wife. I don't know about you, but any of the vicar's wives I've known are not just women, they are super women. And I don't even know what a woman is, let alone a super woman. I cannot wear my pants outside my trousers. I was so scared. I went back to my old habits again, stopped eating. And this time there were no grown-ups to tell me how to eat again, you know. And I got to the point where I was dying. And nobody, it seems, could do anything. Yeah, and that would have been me in my mid-20s. So early mid-20s, you'd have seen someone who looked like she was pretty successful, you know, she was doing well, but inside a total mess of insecurity, a total mess of questions, and what am I worth? What is the point in life? What is everything about? And then later in my 20s, you'd have seen a skeleton, a girl who seemed to be on the path to death, and nobody could stop her.
And many of those things you described are kind of like coping mechanisms almost, aren't they? Things that make you feel sure about existence when it's out of control, out of kilter, in chaos. I wonder if you could help us by describing maybe the one thing that would really help you to feel you're on an even keel and your feelings were in check, even if for a temporary moment, to give your life certainty at that time.
Well, I guess all of the behaviours were about taking back control. The world seemed to me to be a very dangerous place. And it's funny, with an eating disorder, in some ways, it is a bit like its own religion, isn't it? You're saying the sin, the bad thing is to put on weight. And I've got these kind of sacraments where if I eat certain things, if I exercise a certain way, I can make my body my own universe that I absolutely can control and shape in every way. And OCD, which for me was about hand washing, was quite similar, only this time the bad thing, the world out there, were germs. And by washing and doing certain rituals or performing, I could make myself clean, just as I could make myself worth something by shrinking myself with anorexia. With OCD, I could make myself clean by actually cleaning myself. And with grades, I could make myself be worth something by, you know, every time I got a tick from my professor or whatever, I was like, right, I'm worth something, I am worth something. But the ticks never added up. Or, you know, it could have been I went out with a guy at uni who wasn't a Christian. I really fell in love with him, and I really felt like when I was with him, I was worth something because he thought I was beautiful and he appreciated me. Or so honestly, Joe, I just went from one thing to another, but all of them were about saying the world is in your control and the problem is in you, but you can also fix it. You define the problem, whether it's dirt or whether it's being too fat or whether it's not being smart enough or not being pretty enough, and you fix it by getting your grades, by making yourself look better, by getting thinner, by washing, by whatever it is. And that is the very opposite of the gospel. And it's a system of slavery where sometimes you feel like you're getting somewhere, you know, the number in the scales is the number you want it to be, or I don't know, you hand in an assignment, it goes really well, or you go to a party and you really enjoy yourself and you feel like you've had a great night and you look good or whatever. But then it's never enough. The next day you wake up, you feel low, you need to go further, you want more. It never fills that hole.
Hope then broke in your mid-20s at this stage that you describe arriving at. What began to change? How did it change for you?
Well, I guess it's kind of an event and a process. The event really was, I'd gone away with my husband. We'd gone to a little cottage somewhere because, yeah, things were really bad. And yeah, I was very, very unwell. And my grandmother, who had been one of my best friends from Ireland, died, but I couldn't go to the funeral, which is a big thing in Ireland, as it is everywhere. You know, you have big family funerals, you go, that's how you say bye-bye. And that night I was staring in front of the fire and I realized, look, I kind of saw myself from outside, this skeleton, this person who was proving her whole life, trying to prove herself, and yet made herself absolutely nothing and couldn't even go and say goodbye to the one person in the world that she loved the most. And I think in that minute, I kind of cried out to God, but not the headmaster God that I was trying to serve and prove myself to. We'd been looking at readings from my granny's funeral, and we read from a book in the back of the Bible called Revelation. And there's a description of Jesus in there. And it says, you know, he has eyes that are blazing like fire and hair like wool, and he's got a voice like rushing waters. And I read that and I'd always felt like I was too much for everybody, you know, like there was too, like that mess, there was too much of me and I needed to shove it all back in. But here was someone who was more intense than me, who blew my intensity out of the water, someone who could look at me and see me and would not be afraid of that. And in fact, he could say, come on, give me more. And so I kept reading. And then there's another description of Jesus. It describes him as being like a lion, the Lion of Judah. And again, you know, when you think about this girl who's desperate to take control, terrified of the world and everything in it, and trying to be God of her own world, here finally was someone who genuinely did have control of everything and who could be trusted. And I didn't have to try and take it on myself. He was Lord. He was a beautiful blazing lion. And I could hand it over to him because everything was in his hands. My life, my big questions, he could answer everything. But then as I turned the page, there was another description of Jesus that struck me even more. It says he's a lion, but he's also like a lamb that's been sacrificed. And that to me was amazing because I think I really felt like I was broken. I felt like I was nothing. And how could this incredible God make himself so small, like a lamb, and be broken willingly, but a sacrificial lamb, a lamb who's broken for other people? So someone who not only understood the brokenness and the pain and the sadness and the shame of my life, but also someone who took it on himself. He said, look, Emma, you don't pay for whatever you think you've done wrong in your own body. I've taken it on mine. That's what I do when I die on the cross. You know, I'd expected an angry God with a fist who would say, do better, pull your socks up, come to me whenever you fixed yourself. And here instead, I found the Lord who saw me exactly as I was, who was broken for me, who said, come to me for the bath, come to me to be washed, and I will lead you out. And you don't need to know who you are. You don't need to have answers. You don't need to know what the future holds, because I know it and you can trust me. So just take my hand for this next step. Take my hand for now, for tonight. That was the beginning then of falling in love with Jesus, and the beginning of moving forwards and actually facing the heart issues that were underpinning all my different behaviours. But in the safety of a Lord who loved me and had seen me at my worst and wasn't going to run away and could change and redeem even those things. And that gives me the boldness to say, this is who I am, and Jesus loves me. That gives me identity, and that means that I can live a life that is bigger, that is more beautiful, that is more frightening, but also that is life than the small, safe world that's also like a tomb that I'd made.
How did that moment of taking God's hand, trusting him, steady feelings and thoughts in your head? and change the way that you look at your body?
Well, I'd love to say that it was instant. I'd love to say the next day, you know, I was like, honey, okay, we'll go to KFC for breakfast, and this is the beginning of the... It wasn't like that at all. Hasn't been like that at all. I think that there was a step change for the first time I realized that my body wasn't my own and I wasn't my own. And that was frightening, but it was also a huge relief, you know, because I've been trying to kind of create myself, to make myself be worth something. And I just couldn't do it, you know. And I remember even in sort of therapy and stuff, you know, people would say, look, you're really hard on yourself. If you look within, you'll find a princess. And I never did. I always looked within and I found this awful frog. I found fears and I found desires and I found a mess that I couldn't make sense of. And for the first time, I think in the gospel, somebody acknowledged the truth of that, you know, and said, yes, you are messed up, Emma. You really are messed up in ways bigger than you'd ever realized. But you know what? It's not just you. It's everybody. That's the human heart. And there was such liberation in that, to hear, yeah, you are worse than you thought you were, but actually there's a solution, and it's God's solution, and it comes from outside of you. Then for the first time I was able to see that I had an identity that came before anorexia, because, you know, or OCD or anxiety, because I'd lived with most of these things for my life. I didn't really know what it was like to be without them. But in the gospel, you know, we're told that Jesus, he knows you when you're even formed in the womb, and he gives you, when you come to him, a new name and a new start. I guess that enabled me then to see this body, this mind, this brain that I think is so rubbish is actually his. It's been made for something, and he knows what that is, and I want to find out. But the way that I find out is not by looking more and more into myself, even though the therapy and everything is very useful. It's finding out who he is and being caught up in a bigger story. The more I fell in love with him, the smaller the concerns about food or being in control gradually seemed. And I had to work really hard to do things like regaining weight, or, you know, opening up to other people, for example. I always felt I could do it myself. And actually, one of the biggest things I find is that God puts us in community with other people. But the church community is a place not of people who have it together, but a place of people who are broken. That is what a Christian is. Someone who goes to somebody else. Well, I might not have these same struggles, but my heart's messy. Is yours too? Oh, phew, right. Let's look together at this Lord who gives us hope, and then let's work together through our individual struggles, whatever they may be. You know, it might be for you, you're an alcoholic. It might be that, I don't know, that you have a drug addiction, or it might be that you're struggling with pornography, or it might be that a million and one different things. But let's do this together. That changed the way that, not just I saw the way that I saw my body, that was a big part of it, but the way that I saw the whole of me as being worth something, because created and loved by God. And therefore I couldn't just throw it away. And it was almost, in a sense, like you see yourself differently, and you see yourself as a child, and you look at that child and you go, well, am I going to feed that child? Am I going to take care of them? Well, yeah, it's a child, you know, that's a wee girl, of course. From going to your body being something else and outside of you, and you being this outside thing you could create, to know now you're a child of God's.
The other thing I really appreciate about your story is just how earthy it is, actually. There's a lot in the nitty-gritty. There's a lot focused on the body. And yet, tonight we're talking about hope. And we imagine, I think, when some people think of hope, a kind of distant plane in the future that remains invisible, but is like a kind of idyllic picture of paradise, but nothing more than that, really. And maybe just as a final question for some clocking on that aren't religious, that are exploring things, what about that vision of the future found in Christian hope gives you cause to rejoice even in the present?
Well, I think you're right. The hope that I have is, it is a gritty hope, and it's a hope of blood and guts and dirt. In most religions, your God is kind of far off. In Christianity, God, we don't work our way up to God. God comes down to us, and he comes down to us in our mess. He gets his hands dirty. He makes himself into a little baby. Christianity, interestingly, also has a higher view of the body, I think, than we do in our own culture. God doesn't say, okay, well, here's the old Emma or here's the old Joe. And what we're going to do is we're going to give a new version of them, because the old one's just, oh, God says, I'm going to take that old stuff and I'm going to make that into the new. So what we do with our bodies now and with everything really matters. It's a hope that is real. It's a hope in a person. It's a hope in Jesus, who walked and talked and bled and died and was raised, and is going to raise us as well, and raise, you know, these fingers, this face, this body, so that I'm actually going to touch him and see him and know him. You might have heard of, like, there's a Christian called Johnny who had a terrible accident when she was growing up. She was a great athlete and she became a quadriplegic. And she talks, and if you can look at some of her talks online, she talks so powerfully about the day when she will throw that wheelchair away and she's going to run into Jesus' arms, and she knows that reality. And that is concrete, you know. It's not just airy fairy pie in the sky. Heaven's going to be a place with a harp and, you know, hopefully there'll be some nice food or whatever. It's actually real. It's concrete. It's the Jesus who comes back from the dead and eats fish with his mates in a barbecue on the beach. I mean, oh, amazing. I don't know about you, but my mess, my problems are too big for something like, well, let's think positive because tomorrow's a new day, or you know, keep hoping and it'll all work out okay in the end. That's not enough for me. I'm sorry. I need a lot more than that. I need Jesus. I need facts. I need his resurrected physical body, and I need that physical resurrection that is coming to me, that day that is coming. And also knowing that the resurrected Jesus will come and take me back to be with him, to live bodily in this incredible new creation. But his spirit is even in me today, even working in this broken body today, and I can know him and know that fullness in part even now. I've got that taste of what's coming, and it's going to be amazing. But even today, I can taste it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emma, for chatting to us. It's been a real joy.
Guess who is back? It is me. So I am just gonna explain where we're gonna go from here and what's going on. So as I mentioned earlier, we have like a mental health kind of chats evening tonight. So it's on Zoom at 7:30. I'll be hosting it, so you can meet me in person. Exciting, I know. So we're just going to be going to breakout rooms, and there's going to be the option for like deeper questions and deep chats, and then just general mental health chats or anything. And then there's going to be, I think, a games room, and just chit chat. So it'd be a great chance to meet new people or discuss things that you find challenging, whatever you want from that. There's a place for it this evening. So also, right, this is not the end of events week, so it's the end of the first week. So we're back on Monday, I believe, with different topics, which if you head over to the Hallam CU Instagram, there'll be more about them. So, and also, we are a society here at Hallam CU Uni. Our aim is to get the message of the gospel out to everyone here on campus. So we meet every Thursday on Zoom normally, and hopefully back in person in a bit, which will be so exciting. We also have our online small group. So for example, mine's every Friday, and I just meet with a small group of people and we discuss the Bible, and it's such a great place to just have a chat with people each week, and it's got a really good feeling of community. But then also to find out more about who Jesus is. At the moment, we're going through some parables. You don't have to be a Christian to come to these at all. Just message us and we'll sign you up to one. It's just a great way to make friends and find out more with no pressure. And yeah, so hopefully see you this evening. Yeah, please check out our page, Just Ain't the End. It'd be great to meet all you guys, if I haven't already. So see you later.